Let's get ready to grumble!
I learned on my own through tremendous amounts of people feeding me information, but also because my life had been fucked up. I had lost a 17-year career at Bell Atlantic / Verizon. And, here I was going for my PhD, of course I should be able to find a job without any problem because I didn't understand what was going on during the great financial crisis. I was not where I am today then, 2008-9. I was just finishing up with a master's degree. The 2008 was my last degree that I received, and that degree was the Master of Business Administration. And I ended up going to China for about a month for my capstone, 2 or 3 weeks anyway, for my capstone for that second MBA or the second master's degree that I got. During that time period, I was still a Republican. I was still very much in process. I was a Ron Paul guy, big time Ron Paul guy. In fact, I supported Ron Paul in 2012. And so I came from the libertarian side. So all the stuff you hear me talk about frequently, I was a right winger. So I speak fluent right wing. I was a libertarian. I speak fairly fluent LOL libertarian. I got into all the Creature from Jekyll Isle shit. I was a Rothschild hater. I look back, my memories from Facebook are like a who's who and how stupid can Grumbine be. I look at some of the shit that I put out there and I just laugh now. And I share it with people too, because it's part of my story, right? It's part of the proof of why I do this so much is because I was a right winger. Folks, a right winger, okay? I listened to Rush Limbaugh every single day on the ride into work. Every day. I listen to him on every day. Dano, I'm tanned, rested, and ready to run. Dead president of the United States. All those things, right? So I was there. And MMT, the knowledge of modern monetary theory, was the thing that cracked through the fucking brain fog that wouldn't allow me to divorce myself of, you should have made better choices. Why didn't you? I was the one that stayed home at night doing my homework. Why didn't you do the same thing? All the same bullshit you hear from right wingers and conservative Democrats, right? Same thing. I was no different, garden variety. And so I think it's important. I think it's important to know that MMT is a kind of lens that changes all the bullshit that goes on between your ears. And it really fundamentally made me rewire all these things I'd learned in grad school, rewire all these things I learned being a Sig Heil right winger. Folks, I had all the traits of a right winger. Bigotry, a lot of it was founded in not understanding. So when I see the stuff that I see out there, I understand that MMT is a game changer. Modern monetary theory is a lens. In other words, it helps you understand how all the plumbing works. It helps you understand if you do what you think you were going to do, like job guarantee, what would that do to the economy? Or Medicare for all, what would that do to the economy? Or going to war or raising interest rates. It helps us understand all of that stuff. Okay. And so for me, once I understood that MMT was a lens, I started asking more questions and I found out where good resources were, on and on and on. In order for me to understand the stuff that we're about to go over, I really, truly needed to understand modern monetary theory. If you don't understand where currency issuers are and where currency users are, it's real easy to get lost in the sauce. It's real easy to get things very, very wrong. And unfortunately, vast numbers of our movement get things really wrong. And then when they're called out on it, they assume it's something about them that's wrong. And in reality, it's just that we've all been taught very wrong. This right here is how we get to the military-industrial complex. When I realized how this pertained to the MIC as well as to healthcare and everything else, the light bulbs went off and everything came into focus. I was just stumbling along trying to understand more about the military-industrial complex, trying to understand funding, because apparently, once again, we're looking at the military getting a huge amount of funding, billions upon billions of dollars of funding, guaranteed funding for our 800 plus military bases around the world, plus all of our excursions, you name it, $800 billion. We're begging for healthcare. We're carrying copays, and we're doing all. And people always say, "Well, how come there's always money for war and not money for, regular people?" And that got me thinking back to John Fetterman, who was talking about fracking and how he's for fracking. I live in the state of Pennsylvania. John Fetterman would have been my senator had he, not stumbled last night. And it's not over yet, but it doesn't look good. So let me just show you this. This right here is from the Department of Defense. And why does this matter? I want you to think about this. If the military-industrial complex is, we got to cut it, we got to do this, and I don't disagree with you. I do not disagree with you that we should cut the military. What I want you to understand, because of what we call military Keynesianism, the military is the primary way that our current Congress, and not just our current Congress, but many, many Congresses and many, many administrations have used to keep the economy going. So understand that they're combining the military-industrial complex with our training, education, and development, and community uplift, and reinvigorating the community, you name it, right? I mean, jobs and tax revenue into the state, okay? That's what this is about. I want you to understand. Why does it matter? Because states, they don't create their currency. They only get money if big business comes through and does its due. So when you look at this, it says, understanding the depth and reach of our contract spending is essential as we strive to strengthen our defense industrial base, said William LaPlante, Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment. The Department of Defense requires resilient, diverse, and secure supply chains to limit vulnerabilities and ensure the development and sustainment of critical capabilities. So when you start looking at this, Virginia, number one, has $62.7 billion spent into the state of Virginia for military. California, right on the heels of it, $57.4 billion of federal money going to the military-industrial complex contractors in the state of California. $47.3 billion inside of the state of Texas. $30.9 billion in New York. $30.1 billion in Florida. But as you go through this, you just realize the Washington state, huge state. Pennsylvania, huge state. And then it goes through here and it tells you which defense contractors receive the most money. Number one, Lockheed Martin, $39.2 billion. Boeing, $23.6 billion. Raytheon, $21.4 billion. 8 of the 10 companies were on the list for fiscal year 2020. Pfizer and Moderna were both new to the list and are anomalies for traditional defense spending. If you believe that the way the society and the way the country are funded is by banks, you're an idiot. That's not how it's done. Sorry, I'm just going to call a spade a spade. Federal government is how it gets spent, okay? So this is an MMT case study. Once again, what happens if I cut the spending to the defense? Virginia, California, all these states, every single one of them. You see that right there? That right there is a very, very real deal right there. This is what's happening in the state of Pennsylvania. To fund schools, they want to tax fracking. So who do you think is going to fight tooth and nail to prevent us from actually stopping fracking? The state of Pennsylvania can't afford it. Their politics suck. The state I'm in sucks from a political standpoint. And worse, because they're not a currency issuer and because they're so tight at the margins, The only way a state like Pennsylvania could survive is with federal intervention. Do you want schools to be unfunded? Is that it? See how this plays out? Do you want schools to be, do you want children to do without new books and great classrooms? But I want you to understand, because states are underfunded in the worst way, and because states have to tax their people to stay afloat, unlike the federal government, which is absolutely 100% self-funding. Federal government creates currency. Your taxes aren't used for paying for things. They're just deleted. They're used as the need. They make the need, they create the need for the currency, right? That's why Bitcoin will never displace the dollar. That's why all these cryptocurrencies will never displace the dollar or the yen or the ruble or the UK pound or the Australian dollar. It won't displace any of them. Imagine if you cut 62.7 billion out of Virginia's budget, took away that money, they didn't have it. 57 billion for California, etc. Right? These states jockey for this. This is why they fight base closures. This is why they fight any of that stuff. It's why they fight to have the buttons on the uniforms to be built in their backyard, because they want to have all those things, all those aspects built there, because they need the revenue. States have to tax to survive. Companies want to go where taxes are low. So what ends up happening is groups like Texas, who has no problem eliminating any kind of tax burden on businesses coming down there. Come on down here, man. Come on down here. We're open for business, right? They will take a business right out of Detroit, Michigan. They will take a business right out of the old Pittsburgh. They will take a business right out of the old Buffalo. They will take a business right out of your backyard. And that will suddenly become a dry well. Nothing to mine out of it, because the business left. And the people that were left there, they got nowhere to go. In this state-by-state race to the bottom, states are competing with each other, and they're dropping the bottom out to make the costs so much lower for the business. Come on in. What do you think suffers? What do you think suffers? Do you think it's maybe the schools? Do you think it's maybe public services? Do you think maybe it's the power grid? Do you think that it's simply fucking up every state in the country? Yes. Most of our movement is economically illiterate. That's not a cut down, that's a truth. Most of the people you and I depend on to make it so that this stuff isn't happening don't know any better. They just say, cut the military. When the federal government spends money, it spends it on something. It doesn't just create money for the hell of it. Well, we'll print money and we'll use it later. No. It says, hey, we offered one of these contractors, right? We offered one of these contractors a contract. Lockheed Martin, $39.2 billion. Boeing, $23 billion. Whatever. General Dynamics, $16.9 billion. That money goes into the Treasury's account. The Treasury then spends that money to Lockheed Martin or whatever government contractors all over the world. That's how money starts. That's how it enters into the world. One minute it didn't exist, the next minute it did. And I used to be a libertarian, so everything I say is coming from where I once stood. I used to be a Republican, so all the shit talk is coming from a guy who once knew it and did it and now undid it. So when I'm telling you about this stuff, imagine my surprise that Democrats resist it almost more than Republicans. Très bizarre, huh? Très bizarre. They're still so hell-bent that they need to raise taxes to pay for things that they can't get out of their own way. That is the power of the tax. It doesn't matter whether you believe in it or not. When you have to pay that tax, baby, that's all real, right? And you can't pay it in chicken necks, sex. You can't pay it in freaking drugs. You can't pay it in seashells. You can't pay it in shitcoin. You can only pay it in US dollars. There's a reason for that. It's not that the country needs its own money back, folks. It deletes it. It shreds it. It needs it back so it can purge it because it's going to spend new money in. That's why I want you to think about this. That's why it's foolish when you hear people go, they're just printing money, man. They're just printing money. When you hear someone say they're printing money, you may not be where I am in your journey, but where I am in my journey is the minute someone says printing money, I literally throw up in my mouth a little. I literally do. Because we don't print money. Okay, I've talked about this before, but the fact is that the only time there's paper money really, and there's a war on cash, folks. Read Brett Scott, please. But the only way money comes in is via a keyboard, okay? They keystroke this stuff in, and when it comes back as a tax, they delete it out. Because whenever they spend a dollar into the economy, they create a subsequent reserve. So if you have a split ledger, you have debits and you have credits, they go ahead and register a reserve inside the banking system as a placeholder for the dollars spent into the economy. When dollars come back in, the reserve is deleted and it's gone, okay? But they do something to drive money, to make it so it needs to get spent, and it's called interest on reserves. This is part of how the Federal Reserve, quote unquote, makes money. We'll get to that in a second. But what they do is with the interest on reserves, this is new money creation, man. The interest on reserves is basically expanding the money supply. So they want to bring taxes back to close out those reserves, okay? But where's the money come from to pay for the reserve to begin with? It comes from the federal government. It comes from the federal government, okay? We don't have to sell bonds to finance government spending. They sell bonds, as Stephanie Kelton said, because it's collateral, if you will, for printing money, as they say. And so because of that, they don't understand the difference between the federal government, which is the currency issuer, and the only way it issues currency is to spend it on something, which means it would need to be a federal bill, like Medicare for All. Instead, they want to talk about doing it at the state level, where I've already demonstrated in spades that the states can't handle this shit because they're currency users. And because they're in a war to the death with each other to steal business away from each other. And in the cases where they're unsuccessful at stealing businesses from each other, they instead decide to raise money through fracking, because after all, fracking is sustainable because it ain't going away. See, whatever you tax, you legitimize. If you want to fund a program by taxing the rich, now this doesn't work anyway because, let's be fair, at the federal level, it doesn't matter because the rich don't have anything to do with it. We can make them irrelevant by spending directly. It matters at the state level, though, because what you tax and you depend on for funding, if it goes away, it's gone, right? So if you think a federal bill has to be taxed by taxing the billionaire class, definitely tax them. I'm not saying don't tax them. Tax the fuck out of them. They don't pay for a cent of that program. Not a penny. Why does it matter? Because a lack of understanding of economics. Our very good people that are fighting for children to have good education are busy funding it with fracking because it ain't going anywhere. So they now need fracking to stay in place to fund these state-based programs. Because the problem is we're creating these programs, now these kids, to give them the goods and services they need, to give them the education they need. They're going to fund it. They're going to fund it through fracking. Well played, folks. Well played. If you'd like to learn more, please feel free to see the full version of this at Real Progress in Action's YouTube channel and find my Q&A. Also, the discussion of the state-by-state view of the military-industrial complex. With that, thank you so much, Status Coup, for putting this important information out with someone like Jordan and Status Coup, putting quality information. Small channels like ours end up getting overlooked. So I want to thank all the Status Coup members, all the folks that support the channel for supporting Real Progress in Action and Real Progressives, and of course, my podcast, Macro and Cheese, and myself. Have a great day, everybody. Another episode of Let's Get Ready to Grumble out.
And